Senator Vance agreed with the governor agreed right back. But that's the tone and the kind of theater review of this. I'll pick out two issues. On the question of the top of the news today, which is the Middle East and the kinds of foreign policy surprises that hit any president. Tim Walz made the case that Donald Trump's temperament is unfit for any kind of surprise, cited the members of the Trump administration who have attested to that. Vance came back and said there were no wars during the Trump administration. On the economy, I'll make a political point, which is that what Vance did was something Donald Trump was incapable of doing during his presidential debate, which is repeatedly saying, if Kamala Harris was going to do these things, why didn't she in office? Now, whether voters buy that or not, Tim Walz mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act and a variety of other items under Biden. But returning to that political point has worked in the past for Donald Trump against Hillary Clinton. We'll see if it works this time. I'd like to make a final point on tone. The J.D. Vance on that stage was very different than what people may have seen in podcasts. But then there was an air of unreality about it. He talked about bipartisan solutions with nuance of a kind we never saw during the Trump administration. He talked about Donald Trump almost as the defender of the Affordable Care Act. Donald Trump tried to kill the Affordable Care Act. And then I think at the very end of the debate, we saw something extraordinary. Tim Walz asked J.D. Vance if Donald Trump lost the election. He was incapable of answering that simple yes-no question. J.D. Vance can only get so far from the man at the top of the ticket, and that was on display in that one moment, although J.D. Vance was a different kind of person than we've seen in many instances.
John, I think what you're saying is so important when we talk about demeanor because of the expectation that was hanging over these candidates heading into tonight. J.D. Vance came to the stage with the lowest likability rating of all four candidates at the top of the ticket. And I think many people came in expecting him to be Donald Trump's attack dog tonight. That's not the side we saw from him. There was a couple of compassionate moments even. You mentioned the word cordiality. We saw that from him very much. I also think it's worth pointing out the demeanor we saw from Governor Walz, particularly when it came to his moments where he was put on the defensive about his own biography and embellishments that he has made in the past, particularly in this case on China. You and I have talked about this a lot coming into this evening. Major, you're going to help us with fact checks over the course of the next few minutes. But there is a big one that we need to talk about at the top of it, which came on immigration in the discussion tonight, and particularly the Trump administration's plan, a major centerpiece of their campaign to undergo mass deportations for undocumented immigrants in this country. J.D. Vance particularly said that migrants will be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. This was in the conversation, this ongoing conversation about Haitian migrants in Springfield, Ohio. Many of them are recipients of temporary legal status, and we just have to say, John, that they are in this country legally.
All right, we will be right back in a moment with more coverage of the vice presidential debate, and we'll fact check some of the claims made by both candidates.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing, bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else.
this case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 Hours, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
Or you can be real.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Eye on America, weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
All right, we are going to bring in our amazing political team here. Major, I want to start with you and your big thoughts as you watch these 90 minutes unfold.
I would call this the Warren G. Harding Memorial Vice Presidential Debate. In 1920, Warren G. Harding promised the country a return to normalcy. That's what this debate was. It was substantive, far more substantive on the facts and policy than the leading candidates, the presidential nominees, have been to date. It was, in a way, a kind of embrace of bipartisanship on tough issues, gun violence, health care, child care, even, well, this was less true, on reproductive rights. And one thing that I think will be a surprise to anyone in the Republican Party, the biggest secret of the entire Trump administration is that he saved Obamacare. It's a big secret because he never even said that. But this debate was an example to the country of how you can disagree agreeably, how you can talk about shared goals for the country. And in that sense, I think it's extremely important for J.D. Vance that he did not sound as he sounds on the stump. It was his biography and his appeal to bipartisanship that will be most distinguishing about not only his present, but his possible future.
Nancy, your thoughts?
I think if you took a shot every time you heard the words, I agree tonight, you'd be under the table right now. This was a surprisingly affable debate for two men who we know from our reporting do not like each other. They said that they agreed on housing policy. They said that they agreed on some aspects of immigration policy, on pro-family policy. They were clearly intent on showing that they are likable, that they are agreeable for all the reasons, Cecilia, that you laid out earlier. The Democrats that I'm talking to feel fine about the debate. They're not doing cartwheels the way they were after the Harris and Trump debate a few weeks ago, but they think that this went well for them, and I predict that that exchange between Vance and Walz about whether Donald Trump lost the election is going to end up in a Harris ad by the end of the week.
Bob?
Both of these contenders came to the stage tonight being favorites of the base in their respective parties. Governor Walz was someone who went on television and called Republicans weird. Senator J.D. Vance was someone who would go on podcasts with Donald Trump Jr. and other favorites of the right and say the left was essentially weird. Tonight on stage, you didn't hear a lot about that. You heard an approach to build on our colleagues' reporting and analysis here. It was about appealing to the middle. For J.D. Vance, giving reassurance to traditional Republicans, conservatives, that they have a place in this Republican Party, even with former President Trump. They might not like those traditional Republicans' answer on the election, but they might like his answer on the economy and on border security. And for Governor Walz, it wasn't about being an attack dog. It was trying to make an overture to that centrist voter in a battleground state and say, hey, with Vice President Harris as a teacher and a coach.
Ed Gordon, quickly before we wrap, one of the big issues, though, was immigration, so much so that they had to shut the mics off at one point.
Yeah, but I think the civility that we saw tonight may be a mistake by Democrats, quite frankly. I talked at the outset of energizing this base. I was just in Ohio, and many Democrats were livid about what's going on in Springfield. I think Walz missed an opportunity to really push the racial insensitivity there. There was a sense of trying to be affable, as John said. And I think what we're going to see from this point on is the civility being laid aside. And as we've said, from this point on, gloves are off, I think.
Major, you've spent a lot of time thinking about Donald Trump. How might he react to his number two
So what Donald Trump will take away is the first third of the debate, where J.D. Vance made a very strong case that the Trump record on, was the world on fire, yes or no? No, it wasn't. Was the economy better? Yes, it was. Trump will be very happy with that. I think he will largely ignore and forget all the bipartisan appeals because they don't really fit within his orientation to politics.
Thank you, Major. There is much more to talk about. Our coverage will continue with instant reaction polls and fact checks. That'll be on CBS News 24/7. But for now, for all of my colleagues here, good night.
So when you see all that green, what do you think?
I see money leaving America.
Is this a battle of rich versus poor?
In part it is.
Black versus white?
In part it is.
If you're not willing to protect a place like this, then what are you willing to protect?
1, 2, 3, go!
I want a strong America. I want a proud America.
Is CBS.
Welcome back to CBS News 24/7 for continued coverage of the first and only vice presidential debate between Democratic Governor Tim Walz and Republican Senator J.D. Vance. I'm John Dickerson in Times Square at CBS News election headquarters.
And I'm Cecilia Vega, and I am here. We are here with the very best political team in the business. We want to bring our panel back because we are joined by Chief Washington Correspondent Major Garrett, Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent Robert Costa, Chief White House Correspondent Nancy Cortez, and CBS News contributor Ed Gordon. Major, let's start with you. I was struck by seeing Governor Walz pressed on his biographical embellishments. No surprise that that came up, this question of where he was in college in China, whether he was there, whether he really wasn't. He sort of said, hey, I'm a knucklehead at times, that I misspoke. Is that going to fly?
It's flown in Minnesota, which was his point. People who know me best heard me make this knuckleheaded remark, and they elected me to Congress or governor. They've gotten along with it. America, you should too. And he didn't say this, but I think many Democrats, if they feel they need to clean this up in any way, will say Tim Walz will never lose an embellishment battle to Donald Trump.
Nancy, I was struck by something J.D. Vance said, which was in the reproductive rights section.
Mm-hmm.
He said on abortion, after hearing about the various consequences of the Roe v. Wade being overturned, he then at one point said, there are a lot of people that should be alive. I wonder if that is going to be something that we might see in Harris. In other words, well, yes, the consequences of Roe v. Wade being overturned are not great, and then he tried to move on. But isn't that the point?
Yes, and I think that another challenge for him was that he tried to make the case. He acknowledged that this is a difficult issue for his party, but what he described as the way out of that difficult situation was to say, well, we need to be more pro-family as a party. We need to make it easier for women to have children so that they don't feel like they need to have an abortion. The challenge is that more than half of the country believes that women should have the right to an abortion. And I don't think it's clear that the people who believe that are going to be swayed by, policies that are simply more pro-family.
Bob, what lasts here beyond the end of our conversation in terms of the man at the top of the ticket and the woman at the top of the other ticket?
For Senator Vance, he keeps his relationship with former President Donald Trump, didn't make any major mistakes that would draw Trump's ire. I was tracking Trump's social media all night, positive about Senator Vance. And for Governor Walz, he remains that person who Vice President Harris can count on to go to battleground states and elsewhere and have a convincing personal story about being someone who was a teacher and a coach and comes from an everyday existence in Minnesota, ultimately became a House member and a governor, but came out of the education ranks and served his country in uniform.
We want to go now to Ed O'Keefe, who is there at the debate site. Ed, we just heard from our friend Bob Costa here saying that he's been monitoring President Trump and all signs a go, positive reaction. What are you hearing from the Harris-Walz campaign right now after this?
Cecilia, we're in the spin room here just down the hall from where the debate played out in the CBS Broadcast Center. This used to be a milk processing plant, and it does feel a bit like cattle is being herded here behind us as Senator Vance is now in here, as other surrogates to the two campaigns are now here making their case. The Harris-Walz team suggests that they think he did rather well up against Senator Vance in a few different key moments. One, quoting scripture at that one point during the conversation about immigrants, talking about Matthew 25, the idea that there should be empathy for all people. They say that in their internal measurements of the actual debate, that viewers that were watching liked that scene. The other part that they thought worked pretty well and that voters watching with them or that they were tracking enjoyed was the criticism of the Trump tax cuts for wealthier Americans. But they say, and Nancy was making this point earlier, that final exchange regarding the future of democracy on January 6th was most damning. They say that exchange and Vance's refusal to say who exactly won the election, the fact that he dodged questions about it, is something that they will seize on in the coming days as a reminder to skeptics, to those concerned about Trump, that once again, it appears they may be preparing to question the results of the election and stoke concerns about it. Beyond that, there were, at the beginning at least, concerns among Democrats more broadly about how the governor sort of stumbled out of the gates a bit, especially uneasy on those questions about Mideast policy and what exactly the United States should do in terms of Israel's response to Iran. Some conceding perhaps he, like Senator Vance, should be doing more interviews perhaps out on the trail. In the coming days, remember, Governor Walz is headed to central Pennsylvania to campaign. He was supposed to do that with Vice President Harris, who instead will be staying back in Washington and attending to official duties in the coming days. She'll be visiting storm damage in Georgia, and then we anticipate over the weekend heading to North Carolina. So they will not be seen together on the trail as we thought they might, so that she can attend to official duties and he'll continue campaigning in that key state of Pennsylvania, one where, of course, both he and Vance were hoping to win over support tonight.
Thank you, Ed. Caitlin Huey-Burns is also at the CBS News Broadcast Center. Caitlin, what are you hearing from the Trump-Vance camp?
Well, the Trump campaign is essentially doing a victory lap. Quite literally, they were eager to come into this spin room and talk to reporters, senior advisors, campaign manager, and Donald Trump Jr., who, of course, is very close with J.D. Vance and was influential in that decision to name him as VP. But notably, I was talking to a campaign source who was heavily involved in this preparation, and they noted that there was in the prep a kind of conscious effort to focus on J.D. Vance's personal side, knowing that this was going to be an introduction of sorts to millions of Americans watching. And if you think about it, going back to when J.D. Vance was announced as the running mate, remember, he was told 20 minutes before this was announced that he would be the running mate. Then they had the convention, and the focus was very much on the top of the ticket and Donald Trump. And then came these interviews that were discovered that J.D. Vance had done, these controversial statements that he had made in podcast interviews and kind of other forums. They see this as a kind of a reset, but mostly to focus personal stories on the economy, which they believe is a deciding factor in this election.
All right, Caitlin, thank you so much. Senator Vance and Governor Walz made many claims tonight. Major Garrett has been fact-checking them on the fly and in real time. Major, you're going to start with opioid deaths.
That's right. And I just want to let everyone know, the CBS News Confirmed team has done an entire fact check of the entire debate. You can find those fact checks on social media, CBS News, or on our website, CBS News Confirmed team. I'm going to summarize 3 of them because they all touch on immigration, which was heavily debated in this process tonight, and the issues all run through, one way or another, the conversation, national and otherwise, about immigration. Let's start with the first one, dealing with opioid deaths. It came up in the context of immigration. The claim, this was from Governor Walz. Opioid crisis, the good news is in the last 12 months, the The nation saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history, 30% decrease in Ohio. The CBS News confirmed team rates that partially true, and here's why. Our country's only been counting opioid deaths officially since 2015, and in 2024, our nation recorded, sadly, more than 77,000 opioid deaths. That was down 7% from the year before. About 3,000 deaths in 2024, slightly larger than that in Ohio. That was not a 30% decrease. That was an 18% decrease. That's why the CBS News confirmed team rates that assertion as partially true. Let's go to the next one. And this one has been chewed over extensively in the campaign. J.D. Vance, Republican from Ohio, said, Vice President Harris became the appointed border czar. This could be a semantic issue for some people. We rate it, the CBS News confirmed team, as false, and here is why. That was never Kamala Harris's title. That was never her designated role. Immigration policy flowed through the president and the Secretary of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas. What Kamala Harris was appointed to do or asked to do was look at the root causes of immigration in the so-called Northern Triangle countries, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala. That's why we rate that as false. Let's go to our next one. This is something that J.D. Vance said, again in the context of immigration, housing that is totally unaffordable because we have brought millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. CBS News confirmed team rates that as partially true. Clearly, and Senator Vance made reference to a Federal Reserve study that says larger migration to America in the Biden administration is one factor in housing stock shortage. But that was a long-running issue dating back to the Great Recession. Americans have been creating more new home stock at a lower rate than at any time since 1960. It is a complex problem. That's why the CBS News confirmed team rates that assertion from Senator Vance as partially true. John and Cecilia, back to you.
Thank you so much, Major. Republican Senator Tom Cotton joins us. He serves on the Judiciary, Intelligence, and Armed Services Committee. Senator Cotton, good evening. Good to have you with us again. I'd like to ask you a question that your senator colleague had trouble with. Did Donald Trump lose the last election?
Well, look, obviously Joe Biden's the president. He's in the White House. That's why everything has gone to hell in a handbasket for the last 4 years. But as J.D. said tonight, he's focused on the future and the future that Donald Trump can restore to America. For 4 years, we had stable prices, rising wages, a secure border, and a peaceful, stable world. And over the last 4 years, because Joe Biden has been president and Kamala Harris has been his vice president, we've had everything going to hell in a handbasket. Donald Trump is going to bring back the good times we had. Kamala Harris will extend 4 years of Joe Biden's presidency.
I realize that this is about something that's in the past, Senator, but it is something that the Republican nominee for president brings up a lot. And the reason I think it's more than just something that can be dismissed in the past is when you talk to national security officials about domestic violence, they say one of the things that stokes that violence is the idea that the last election was fraudulent and that Donald Trump was the rightful victor. And so this isn't something about the past. It is a kindling of what, according to national security experts, of a present threat of violence. And that's why this is not something that's in the past. Why isn't it easy to just say he lost, and now we hope he wins?
Well, first off, John, I don't know who these experts are you're talking about. Tim Walz tonight just like Kamala Harris has said for years, she wants to defer to the so-called experts. These are the experts maybe that told us we should shut down schools or put kids in masks. These are the same experts that told us that Israel should be restrained every time it gets attacked, as opposed to letting Israel win. So I don't know who the so-called experts you're referring to here, but I can tell you the real threat of violence that we see in America today is rampant crime in our streets, or Kamala Harris and Joe Biden having 28,000 murderers and rapists who are illegal aliens released into our communities. Or for that matter, turning the other way when our streets are burning, as they were during the BLM riots in 2020. Tim Walz being caught flat-footed. Kamala Harris trying to bail out rioters and looters and arsonists. Those are the things that are the real threat of violence in this country today.
Senator Cotton, Cecilia Vega here. One question for you before we let you go on the issue of reproductive rights, which created a healthy exchange on that debate stage. We heard Senator Vance tonight say that many Americans have lost faith in your own party, in Republicans, when it comes to reproductive rights. He said, quote, "We've got to do so much better a job at earning Americans' trust back." Do you agree with that?
Well, I thought J.D. gave a very good answer on the way American democracy works. He said he has his personal views, but the people of Ohio disagreed with them, just like the people of California are going to have a different view than the people of Alabama or Ohio. I think he respects the American people. He will level with them in a way that Tim Walz did not tonight. Tim Walz signed a law that would allow a child born in a botched abortion to die on the table, to be denied life-saving care. Tim Walz refused to answer a question whether he thinks any restrictions at all should be imposed on abortion in the 9th month of a pregnancy. J.D. Vance was leveling with the American people, not only about where he stands, but about how democracy works. He and President Trump respect the diversity of opinion on this question and other questions in our democracy. It's Tim Walz and Kamala Harris that wants a radical one-size-fits-all solution for the country.
Senator Cotton of Arkansas, excuse me. Thank you so much, Senator. Obviously, the governor has a very different view of that law, and he said so repeatedly on the debate stage. Coming up, we'll check back in with a group of Michigan voters to find out if any minds were changed.
These are the stories
1, 2, 3, go!
of we, the people.
We're trying to generate our own hope.
It's a huge deal.
I'm enabling them to feel valued.
Eye on America, weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party? Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides. Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
exclusively on CBS News 24/7, the streaming home of CBS News.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
All right, we said this would be the case, and here we are making good. CBS's Jerika Duncan watched the debate with a group of voters in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We want to go back to you, Jerika. All right, what are they telling you about what they just heard?
Well, I can tell you that we've all agreed that this was a very civil
conversation, and one that they weren't necessarily expecting to hear. They were expecting for there to possibly be more jabs thrown. But as I'm asking you guys again, because we were able to talk before we went to the program, raise your hand if you feel like Senator J.D. Vance won this debate. And then 2 people feel like Governor Walz won the debate. So you said that you felt like J.D. Vance articulated his arguments the best. Bill, talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, he was a very smooth talker.
Very smooth talker.
Yes, he was.
Eric, what about you? I know you said you felt
yeah,
like
I also agree that J.D. Vance, I think, was a smooth talker. The thing that I appreciated about Governor Walz is that I felt like he did answer more of the questions, like with data points and like with evidence. So I appreciated that perspective.
All of you here, when we were talking offline, said that immigration is still a big topic for you. And you all also seem to agree, based on the conversations that you heard when you heard Senator Vance talking about it, as well as Governor Walz. Start with you, Max, about what stood out with the policies that were proposed and why you feel so strongly about it.
Yeah, on immigration, I feel that, as the United States of America, there are people that want to come here for a better life, and there's a legal and proper way to do that, and that needs to be followed. You should expect that if you try to enter a country, illegally, to be turned away. It is a mess that we have found ourselves in over the last 4 years with the extremely heightened immigration and families coming here, children being born here, and then what are we going to do? We've got now children United States citizens and parents that are not. It's a very difficult topic. With it brings the criminal element here as well, and people coming from other areas that they're from a different culture, and things that were okay necessarily where they came from are not okay here, and it creates a serious problem for our criminal justice system.
Ellie, I want to turn to you about reproductive rights, because you said that was the top issue for you outside of gun violence because of your 2 young children as well as the economy. But what did you hear when they were talking about the issue of reproductive rights that struck you? And you also say you're now leaning more toward voting for Trump and Vance after this debate. Before this debate started, you said you weren't sure.
Yeah, I really liked that Vance said that he was pro-family and not necessarily pro-life or pro-choice. It was pro-family, which I really appreciated, and I think you have to take a lot of considerations into account when talking about abortion, and there's a lot to consider, a lot of medical factors, no matter at what stage of your pregnancy. So it's a hard one to decide for me on that one, because I don't think that there was still a clear answer on what his opinion was or what their opinion will be. But I liked his view on it, that it was more pro-family.
Okay, well, we're going to keep talking, and we're going to have more for CBS Mornings tomorrow. But as you can see and hear, economy, immigration, still big issues for these voters today. But the biggest takeaway, all of you guys said you were just surprised, impressed, and actually feeling more hopeful after seeing 2 people sort of go at it, but in a very respectful, civil way. So, John, we'll send it back to you in the studio.
All right, Tarika, thank you. Arizona's Democratic Senator Mark Kelly joins us now. Senator, I want to ask you about the economy and a point that J.D. Vance made repeatedly, which is Vice President Harris has a lot of thoughts and ideas about the economy in the future, but his essential argument was, well, why didn't she do any of that during the Biden administration? What's the answer to that?
Well, she's running to be president of the United States, and you can compare the plan of Kamala Harris to Donald Trump's. And Donald Trump's plan is just a bad deal for the American people. His Project 2025, which, as you saw in this debate, J.D. Vance has to defend, and it's a unpopular agenda where it's going to raise costs for families, $4,000 a year through this flawed tariff plan that he has, where Kamala Harris wants to bring down costs for American families on prescription drugs, health care, child care, education, housing.
And let me ask on the foreign policy front, Senator, which is obviously top of mind when you look around the world at this precise moment. J.D. Vance's argument was there were no new outbreaks of war under the Trump administration, and that while he may, have some behaviors people don't like, that he created a kind of deterrence in his presidency. What's your answer to that?
Well, those behaviors that people don't like is something our allies have experienced during 4 years of Trump being in the White House, and he has rather effectively shredded some of our alliances, and we rely on those alliances for our safety. John, I was over in the Baltics and in Finland just about 6 weeks ago, and they're really concerned about November 5th. They're paying close attention to our election because they feel that if things don't go well in Ukraine for the Ukrainians, that they could be the next target. And they are NATO countries, and if they're invaded by Russia, and I think the American people know where Donald Trump stands on NATO and Russia, that makes Americans less safe. You know, our kids, for some people, their grandkids could wind up in a conflict in Europe, and that isn't good for anybody. It's not good for Europe, our allies. It's not good for not good for us.
Senator Kelly, so much of tonight was about these two candidates introducing themselves to America. Governor Walz has now admitted to misspeaking a few times about his biography, even tonight called himself a knucklehead for it. How should Americans interpret what he said about his past and how he is chalking it up to misspeaking?
Well, I think he was talking about a date, whether it was June, July, or August in 1989, which is, by my math, is 35 years ago. I don't think it's something the American people care about.
Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona, we thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you for having me on.
Our elections and surveys unit got an instant reaction to the debate, and so let's head over to Anthony Salvanto with the results.
Hey there, John. We did indeed nationally representative sample of people who watched the debate tonight, and the tone, they told us, was overwhelmingly positive. Almost 9 in 10 said that it was. And then we asked, of course, who do you think did the better job? Who do you think won? And that was effectively even. It was 42 Vance, 41 Walz, and 17% a tie. So look, this was very even, but what's underpinning that was that people told us that each of the candidates they thought was reasonable, number one, and then number two, another thing I noticed, John, was that the favorable ratings for each of those candidates went up compared to how they came into the debate, was higher afterwards. So all of that sort of underpins this really positive tone that people came out of the debate with.
Anthony, thank you so much. I want to bring back in our team for some closing thoughts. Major Garrett, Robert Costa, Nancy Cortez, Ed Gordon. Major, I want to start with you again. They tried to introduce themselves to America. They tried to answer as many questions as they possibly could. Are there still waters that are murky out there, questions that we did not get answered that we need to know from these two candidates?
Sure. I mean, J.D. Vance tried to find, when he was struggling with the Republican record or perceptions of Republicans on reproductive rights, health care, gun violence, to sound bipartisan because he knew that was the safest life raft to get into metaphorically. Those issues redound to the benefit of Democrats. And Kamala Harris will take those appeals for bipartisanship and say, but they don't work with your record. On the plus side for J.D. Vance, he very successfully did what Donald Trump did not do in the first debate. Talk about the actual economic record contrasted with Kamala Harris and make the explanation that if you like that record, you might get a repeat if you bring Donald Trump back to the office.
Ed, I want to ask you what I asked Bob earlier, which is what do you think lasts coming out of this debate? Now that it's happened, we go back to focusing on the people at the top of the ticket.
Well, I think both men did what you're supposed to do as a VP, that is do no harm, right? And that's what we walk away with. But after all of the spin room, after tonight, we're right back in the same place. And so really, it really goes back to the idea of motivating your base to get out at the end of the day. And we're down to 7 states. They're going to have to concentrate on those. And I think the black vote is still going to be crucial to Democrats. You're going to have to turn out in record numbers in Philly, Atlanta, Milwaukee. If you do that, I think Kamala Harris has a great road to 270. If you don't, it's going to be hard for her.
you just mentioned the black vote. I want to go back to you and talk about the gender gap. Nancy, did you hear anything tonight that narrows that gap that's been out there?
Well, I'm hearing two strains of thought from Harris allies. One strain of thought is that Walz missed some opportunities tonight to go after J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, not just on issues that are important to women, but also on immigration, even on the childless cat lady thing. They felt that he left some opportunities on the table. I think Ed was talking about something similar earlier. They feel that that he could have been more aggressive. He could have landed some knockout punches. He had the opportunity, he didn't. But the other strain that I'm hearing is, look, that's not who he is. That is not his persona. He is Minnesota nice, and he was never going to be that way, especially not face-to-face. They feel that he got out of this unscathed, and that's the best they can hope for.
Bob, how do you think this, J.D. Vance was obviously benefited from all those TV appearances he's done. How do you think that meshes his more bipartisan, as Major talked about it, that tone matches with the tone of the person at the top of the ticket who's been moving in the other direction rhetorically recently?
Based on my conversations briefly with Republicans tonight, they see Senator Vance as someone, because of this performance, who will be on the national stage for a long time. Former President Trump thought he had a strong, commanding performance. Donald Trump Jr. has said the same. And Governor Walz, we began the night speaking to our friend John Delano at KDKA. He was speaking to that person who watches John Delano every day in Western Pennsylvania, the working voter who's going to decide potentially this election in these swing states.
Yeah, you don't win elections from the left or the right, you win them from the middle, right? And the question is whether they did that tonight.
That's right. I mean, sometimes it's a base election. Sometimes you got to get everybody out in the base. Sometimes it is about the center.
Base plus.
Base plus.
That's what you got to do. Base plus. And both candidates tonight tried to get that plus.
A big thank you to all of you here and our entire incredible political team on this debate night. For all of us at CBS News, I'm Cecilia Vega.
And I'm John Dickerson. Thank you for joining us. Good night. Senator J.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions,